Good morning, everyone. Opening words this morning are a poem called The Faces at Braga. In monastery darkness, by the light of one flashlight, the old shrine room waits in silence, while beside the door we see the terrible figure, fierce eyes demanding, will you step through? And the old monk leads us, bent back, nudging darkness, prayer beads in the hand that beckons. We light the butter lamps and bow, eyes blinking in the pungent smoke, looking up without a word. See faces in meditation, 100 faces carved above. Eye lines wrinkled in the handheld light, such love in solid wood, taken from the hillsides and carved in silence. They have the vibrant stillness of those who made them. Engulfed by the past, they've been neglected. But through smoke and darkness, they are like the flowers we have seen growing through the dust of eroded slopes. Their slowly opening faces turn toward the mountain. Carved in devotion, their eyes have softened through age, and their mouths curve through delight of the carver's hand. If only our own faces would allow the invisible carver's hand to bring the deep grain of love to the surface. If only we knew, as the carver knew, how the flaws in the wood led his searching chisel to the very core, we would smile too, and not need faces immobilized by fear and the weight of things undone. When we fight with our failing, we ignore the entrance to the shrine itself and wrestle with the guardian, fierce figure on the side of good. And as we fight, our eyes are hooded with grief and our mouths are dry with pain. If only we could give ourselves to the blows of the carver's hands. The lines in our faces would be the trace lines of rivers feeding the sea, where voices meet, praising the features of the mountain and the cloud in the sky. Our faces would fall away until we, growing younger toward death, every day would gather all our flaws in celebration to merge with them perfectly, impossibly, wedded to our essence, full of silence from the carver's hands. A couple of years ago, my partner Linda and I had a few discussions on God with a dear friend, during which every time we would talk about our inner moral compass, values, ethics, or conscience, she would insist that this was God. She was truly trying to understand how we continue to hold the belief that there is no God. And no matter how carefully we tried to explain to her our belief that we are all born divine, perfected in love and whole, she would return to her God that both Linda, my partner, and I had rejected even in our childhoods. You know, that God that's punishing and willfully blind to all the suffering in the world, that he ostensibly has the power to stop but doesn't. The one who gave us free will, as any good parent would, but then sends us to hell when we have the audacity to use it. She and all of the people living in our mobile home park in Dunellen, Florida, were at best confused and at worst outraged by our refusal to salute the flag or bow our heads in prayer at our monthly homeowners association meetings. And when we stood up to the bully who is the president of that HOA, There were few who cheered us on or spoke to defend us and others from his pitiful reign of Christian hubris and closed-mindedness. But the straw that broke our friend's back finally was when we declined an invitation to join her and a group of friends at the VFW for a Friday night dinner. We thanked her for the invite, but said that as vegans, there would be nothing there for us to eat. Oh, she said in total exasperation. You don't believe in anything. It would have been funny had it not been so obviously frustrating and incomprehensible to her. What she meant was that we don't believe in guns, God, murder, or rabid nationalism. We don't accept extremist Christian or other faith-supported oppression, fear-mongering, or in taking animals' lives when there is absolutely no need to. When in fact, animal agriculture is keeping starving children hungry, destroying the planet, our own health, and torturing animals so heinously that it is mind and soul numbing. But this outcry from our friend whom we love started me thinking even more conscientiously and consciously about what I do believe. And that's been a journey of clarification that I'm grateful for. When I flip over what I don't believe in and look at the back side of that tapestry, I can clearly see that what I do believe in gives me hope, joy, serenity, optimism, and self-respect. The things I don't believe in come from an even stronger value system that gives me mental and spiritual ease and the ability to look at myself in the mirror every morning. When people of good conscience begin to reframe what we rail against, we're able to see that we're working for a world that aspires to creating the most good and the least harm for all. When we're working for justice, freedom, planetary restoration, and compassion, we realize that we're living our religion in the only way that religion makes sense to us. We're manifesting our belief that kindness is our religion. So when I don't pledge allegiance to the flag, it's not because it is because there is a much higher reality for me. And that reality includes not being able to say false words. There is not liberty and justice for all. And how can we speak the words under God, one nation under God, indivisible, without laughing or crying? I can't speak the words under God when an increasing number of us reject that concept generally, and the mean-spiritedness of so many godly people specifically. When I defend those who kneel during the pledge to protest the false reality expressed in those words, I am not trying to be unpatriotic. I am taking patriotism to a deeper level that includes every single one of us in that statement of liberty and justice for all. And I am refusing to pretend that our country is not hemorrhaging from the untreated wounds of racism, misogyny, homophobia, xenophobia, and a despicable level of wealth inequality. And when I express my belief that there is no God, I am in no way saying that I believe there are not higher levels of awareness, kindness, understanding, or encouragement. I am saying that I believe love, peacefulness, accountability, and responsible stewardship is hardwired into us until our society shuts us up and down. I'm saying that if I did believe in a God, she would not be one who put life in front of us all in its splendor but then spends eternity reminding us that we will all be born into sin because of that one evil woman and her sensual desire to taste life. And I'm absolutely positive that there could not be a God who would cast all of the blame for our sinfulness on one woman or on any woman. How would it be possible for an infinitely intelligent and compassionate God to blame the givers of life, the lovers of nurturance, the builders of community, for all of the evil in the world? How could the literal guardians of our species' future be accountable for all of humanity's downfall? This doesn't make any more sense to me now than it did when I was a child of 9 or 10 and learned in the Southern Baptist Church that all of my beautiful, good, and moral Jewish friends would be going to hell. And when I look at what drives my visceral hatred of guns, it's not because I'm trying to take anyone's rights away. It's because I believe the promise that we are all entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I believe that should take precedence over the toxic American individualism that enables many to think their right to own an assault weapon equals my right to continue to live. It is because I believe that a mother's keening over the loss of her child carries more clout than someone else's right to take that life. When I criticize this administration's stance on almost everything, it is not because I'm a sore loser or it's sour grapes politics as usual. It's because I believe that we, human and non-human animals, deserve to share a healthy and alive planet that belongs equally to all of us as our cherished and only home. It's because I believe that we're responsible to at least the next 7 generations, and that we've been given the awesome and sobering responsibility of being caretakers of this precious planet that's been gifted to us. I do not believe that the biblical admonition of Genesis 1:26 to have dominion meant dominance and power over, but that it was instead a reference to the sacred trust placed in us as worthy temporary stewards of this mystical journey of thousands of generations. We know that there were many agendas represented by those who wrote the Bible, and that much was meant to be representative rather than literal. One spiritual blog I read talked about the idea of man's dominion over as referring to our need to have control over ourselves, and that it is our lower instincts that are being described as all things that creep upon the earth. But humankind has cherry-picked religious teachings to defend everything from factory farming to stoning gays to the rape and almost mortal wounding of the earth, the only mother capable of sustaining us all. Religion and faith in God, Allah, Yahweh, Muhammad, and even Buddha for some, has been used as the rationalization to silence, coerce, murder, exploit, and steal entire cultures and lands in a quest for power over. Religious teachings defend the beliefs and practices of manifest destiny, colonization, the Crusades, witch hunts, female mutilation, slavery, misogyny, overpopulation, and child abuse. To be fair, religion has also been the motivation for a lot of good over time, for a great many people. But religion has always had a built-in leaning toward the belief that only we know the right way, the one right way. Since we changes according to the speaker, the place, the circumstance, and the historical period, the only religion that I can really have any faith in is that of kindness. The Dalai Lama tells us to be kind whenever possible, and then he adds, it is always possible. It's fairly difficult to misunderstand what it means to be kind, or to rationalize that there are times when we shouldn't be. Everyone recognizes kindness and responds to it, even the most broken and scared among us. Kindness is the universal language and costs us nothing at all, ever. A smile at the stressed out mom in the grocery store, holding our friend's hand when she's lost her spouse, telling our children we love them not once a week but every single day, easing the new cashier's anxiety by saying, relax, I'm not in a hurry, you're doing a great job. My religion has become a rich stew with the main ingredients coming from Unitarianism, Native American spirituality, Buddhism, and humane education. When I first read about the Native American perspective on life as a teenager, I felt an inner resonance immediately. The respect for all of life and our interconnectedness existed in indigenous hearts, minds, and practices about 12,000 years before our Unitarian principles were crafted. The seventh principle of respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part has been central to indigenous communities the world over and has only been forgotten, ignored, and pillaged by the very powerful in more recent history. Kindness, equity, and according everyone, including animals and the planet, respect, dignity, and a life free from fear has become the overarching enemy of the conquering empire mentality. Humane education, which informs my life dozens of times every day, looks at all of our global challenges through the many lenses of animal protection, human rights, environmental ethics, and how media and culture shape us without our conscious awareness to behave in ways that constantly conflict with our deepest values. So I learned of indigenous earth and community-centered spirituality first, then tripped into Unitarianism through playing the piano, and finally learned of humane education for the first time in 2004. But the most powerful spiritual practice for me came a few years before that, when I went seeking for something that I couldn't name, and that seeking was answered by my stumbling into a Buddhist Sangha. Led by my two beloved teachers, An Hong and Chun Wen, who were students of Thich Nhat Hanh's for about 2 decades before they were ordained enlightened. In their Sangha, the Mindfulness Practice Center of Fairfax, Virginia, I learned about mindfulness in general and the 5 mindfulness practices taught by Thich Nhat Hanh specifically. Mindfulness practice and humane education have shaped my life in ways more powerful, more heartfelt, and more mind-clarifying than all of the other paths I've followed. I think of these 2 life philosophies as the main path, with other paths of spirituality diverging and rejoining them in constantly changing configurations. Both Buddhism and humane education have at their heart loving kindness, compassion, awakening, and service as the way to true happiness for ourselves and for all others. The website for Deer Park, which is Thich Nhat Hanh's monastery in California, has this introduction to the 5 mindfulness trainings. It says, they represent the Buddhist vision for a global spirituality and ethic They are a concrete expression of the Buddhist teachings on the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path, the path of right understanding and true love, leading to healing, transformation, and happiness for ourselves and for the world. To practice the 5 mindfulness trainings is to cultivate the insight of interbeing or right view, which can remove all discrimination, intolerance, anger, fear, and despair. If we live according to the 5 mindfulness trainings, we are already on the path of the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva, for those of you who don't know, is a person who has awakened, or at least is well down that path, and has chosen to stay here in this reality in order to help alleviate the suffering of the world. Knowing we are on that path, we are not lost in confusion about our life in the present or in fears about the future. In a nutshell, the 5 mindfulness practices are reverence for life, generosity, sexual responsibility, mindful speech and deep listening, and mindful consumption. So all that we would hope for, peace, sustainability, compassion, justice, community, health, abundance, are possible through the practice of these trainings. The trainings are not shallow or superficial. Reverence for life, for example, doesn't just refer to human life or our companion animals' lives, but extends to every being. That includes all wildlife, all domestic and farmed animals, all trees, water, sky, insects, plants, and Thich Nhat Hanh adds minerals. So be careful of those rocks that you abuse. Generosity doesn't just mean our money and treasure. It refers instead to a much broader understanding of the generosity of our presence, our compassion, our loving kindness to all, and even the generosity of giving each person the benefit of the doubt when they're behaving badly. Sexual responsibility saves us all much unnecessary drama and heartache, and reserves that intimacy for only those for whom we have deep, unselfish, and abiding love. Mindful speech and deep listening might be the most important training of all. The way we speak to each other shapes our present and our future, as does the way we speak to ourselves. And our ability to listen deeply to other people, to the hearts of animals, to what nature has to say to each of us about her love for us, determines our ability to become one with all, interbeing, while the absence of it guarantees we remain stuck in separation, isolation, and fear. And finally, mindful consumption refers not just to the food and drink that we take into our bodies, but of what we read, watch, email, and have conversations about. It makes us aware of not only what toxicity we may be consuming, but also what toxicity we may be releasing into the world for others' consumption. At the heart of all religions is the notion of kindness, do unto others. I've begun to think of mindfulness as kindfulness, and to understand that in practicing radical kindfulness, we can create a world that works for all. I'm not talking about some squishy, saccharine niceness. I mean that we model a fierce and gentle warrior approach that is fearlessly kind in speaking difficult truths, standing up for those being bullied and oppressed, insisting on justice for all, not just our own. Radical kindness insists that we give voice to the billions of abused and tortured animals, protect the natural world with our letters, phone calls, and marches, and hold those in power accountable to be in power with, rather than power over. It means that we go beyond being kind ourselves and we insist that others also be kind. So that means calling out our friends who tell racist jokes or make light of a rape culture. It means calling out those institutions and practices that keep feeding the already financially obese at the expense of the resource-starving. It means giving up our comfort zones so that those who have had a boot on their throat can finally breathe. It means doing good without God and being the kind of warrior who serves first and eats last. In individual tragedies and in the collective chaos in which we now find ourselves, many are asking, where is God? I would give the same answer as I heard recently from the UU chaplain. She said that God is in the people who come to help, to encourage, to comfort, and to witness our grief and our despair. May we all be such a comfort in a world of so much pain. May we all be kind in every moment. May it be so.
Join us for worship every Sunday at 10 a.m. at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua, a welcoming congregation. We are located at 3024 Cooley Road, 4 miles west of South Main Street, Canandaigua, just north of the intersection with Routes 5 and 20. Look for the blue signs just before the turn. Your comments about this program or questions about the church are welcome at 585-396-1370 or at our website, www.canandaiguauu.org. Producer and editor, Daniel Brigham.